My name is Kycell, and today I start Chapter 18 in my quest for information regarding the forgotten Minotaur King. As my party, the mouseling Justafe Myrink and half-dwarf Ahani Rawu, approached the dorm that Doctor-in-Training Psychosyllaba had offered us to board in, Myrink had turned and asked of my plan to avenge the Minotaur kind, who recently suffered a horrible assault at the hand of the Mindas Castle's current occupants. I had to tentatively remind her I am a scholar, not a fighter like her. I had no real plan for vengeance. My primary goal when I organized this adventure was to find the secrets of the Minotaur King, Crunturg, that ruled years ago. However, if that pursuit did happen to lead to us somehow stopping the prince of my home kingdom, Dinge, and his betrothed, the Rajalasad princess Wallabunga, from killing kind and destroying any evidence of Crunturg's rule, as seemed their goal, that would be a wonderful bonus. We arrived at Syllabin and her roommate Estelise's dorm, snugly located near the center of the student housing block. Myrink searched beneath a small stone adjacent to the door as we were instructed, and discovered a key to the room. Removing the small brass object and inserting it into the door, Ahani and I followed the mouseling past the threshold. Inside the room was quite spacious. Dual medium-sized beds lined the walls, and various texts and tomes covered shelves along the remaining space. It was much more vast than the communal area the students in my home university were given. Still, a bit too self-conscious to begin poking and prodding around for potential bedding, I simply took a seat on the floor and gestured for Myrink and Ahani to join me. Now was the time for us to come up with our plan for what to do next. I dug through my scrolls and notebooks in my bag for the flyer I showed them the previous night, as well as the newspaper that further detailed the Rajalasad occupation of Goldenarod. In addition to the hulking, toadinous prince of Wolfkeep, his two younger siblings were in attendance at the castle during this time. Also, the guardsman orc, Hansk, with a few other half-orcs in his retinue, as was custom when the royal family traveled. I then brought up the horrid ogre construction team, Bumbogenesis, who I need not remind my friends were responsible for our short-lived companion Dar's death. And now we had this mysterious and frankly demoniac blue-skinned bird goat man, Fugazi, and we had no clue if he was alone or if there were more like him. I then once again brought up the fact that Fugazi kidnapped Kind's little calf, Court, along with his babysitter, the young elven girl we had met in Kind's house. And, if possible, we should try to rescue them as well. The thought of them being in the clutches of that beast was unthinkable. That was when Myrink interrupted.
All of that is a given, but we need a plan of attack, and you still have not given us one.
Hesitantly, again, I brought up the newsletter from the inn. The castle retinue was remodeling and hiring staff for when the job was done. I reminded Myrink when we arrived, the innkeeper said he lost all of his staff, and even Sullivan said all of the medical staff and a number of other professionals had been called to the castle as potential hires. This was our opportunity. If we got jobs in the castle, then not only could we find court and deduce what Fugazi's role in this was, but possibly disrupt whatever plans the Rajalasad had for the kingdom. Selfishly, I'm ashamed to admit the idea of being in the castle King Crunturg himself ruled would provide enormous amounts of information for my book, while Kind, my only close source thus far, was incapacitated. Myrink and Ahani nodded solemnly, but then, glaring at me, Myrink once again spoke up.
Okay, but doesn't the prince and that orc we can't seem to get rid of both know our names and appearances? I'm sure Ahani has been compromised as well, and that snotling orc from the coach terminal may be skeleton food by now, but I am certain he would have described me given the fact I shot his hand off months ago.
I told Myrink she made an excellent point, and our identities definitely would be a concern. However, I said, ending the sentence for dramatic effect, I then produced the magic scrolls I had decoded and transcribed that I recently thumbed past when stabilizing Kind, which fostered the power to slightly alter one's appearance. With the scrolls in hand and a plan vaguely formed, I insisted we try to make ourselves comfortable for the night, or at least until our student doctor and nursed hosts returned. Saika and Estelise arrived at their dorm around late at night, likely busy spending the entire day aiding Kind's recovery. Estelise shook her fluffy, dog-like Rougarou mane and began taking her nursing gear off very forthrightly. I quickly covered my eyes and turned my back to give them some privacy.
Saika girl, how long these ragamuffins supposed to be staying here? It's already crowded enough living with you, seen?
Saika then apologetically reassured her friend, only as long as it took for Mayor Kind to recover. Estelise simply sucked her teeth begrudgingly and went straight to her bed. Saika offered us the extra pillows and blankets she warned us she had borrowed from the school's patient supplies. Myrink, Ahani, and myself all offered thanks as we assembled makeshift beds. Before we turned in for the night, I felt the need to reassure myself of Kind's recovery, so I asked Saika once again how Kind was doing.
As I said before, the sword and horn wounds are pretty rudimentary heals. The wrists, arms, teeth, and horn reattachment will take time. He's already somewhat respondent, but nothing more than mumbles.
I thanked her again. Then I thought it prudent to tell her what our plan was for tomorrow, of infiltrating the castle in disguise to study the enemy and find Kind's son, Court. The expression on her admittedly charming serpentine face showed she wasn't fully convinced it was the best idea, but I asked her to trust me, as we were all trusting her with Kind. With a solemn head nod, she acquiesced the point. Suddenly, realizing she could have more insight, I asked if she knew anything of the castle or the sudden worker summons.
Well, in addition to the doctors of the school, they were looking for personal guards for the royal family, butlers, footmen, blacksmiths, librarians, chefs, and housemates.
This was perfect. I could assuredly gain a position as any of those roles. The same could be said for Ahani and Myrink. For what felt like the 1000th time, I thanked Saika. Fortunately, she simply dismissed my profuseness with an amiable handwave. And now, with that information stored away, I finally got some sleep. The following morning, after Saika and then Estelise, with a huff and a growl, awoke early in the morning, they headed off to attend to Kind. I told Ahani and Myrink the potential positions available for us. I thought it best to go over which we'd prefer, then don our disguises via the scrolls, and leave immediately.
Whatever they offer, I just want to be as far away from the Rajal Assads as possible. Maybe a chef or a stable hand.
Ahani then too posited the position as chef would be pleasant, or else a medical assistant. She offered the reason why was because Estelise made it seem quite important. I offered librarian as pretty much my only preferred choice. The others seemed more physically taxing, and, as Myrink pointed out, would likely put me in direct contact with the royal family. With that decision handled, I produced the scroll of appearance alteration once again. I warned that the effects were said to be minor, lasting up to 48 hours, and could only be used 10 times before the scroll was rendered magically inert. The instructions, as I could best decipher, given my minor in mystical linguistical studies, was to have an image in your mind of yourselves, then alter it as the spell is spoken from the scroll. I held the paper aloft and gave both Myrink and Ahani one last shared look of reassurance. Then I began to read. Postanat Druga Osoba. The first sensation I felt was a tingling all throughout my body. Then it spread to my ear tips, and finally, sharply, in my forehead. I looked at my hands and saw they were a deep purple. With my strange-looking hands, I reached for my forehead and felt an ovular protrusion, a false third eye. Then I reached for my ears and felt they had been reduced to small, barely visible holes. I looked like a Filatov, the race of the elderly man I inherited these scrolls from after he was killed by the Samazzatori. I deduced that this was the result of that man frequently being in my thoughts whenever I handled these scrolls. I looked to Myrink and Ahani and was shocked. While her narrow, pointed face seemed unchanged, Myrink's formerly pristine white fur was now a grungy dark gray with black spots. Her small, rounded mouse ears were cartoonishly elongated and looked similar to an Usagi-Hito rabbit person's. And her right eye was cataract over as if she had lost sight in it.
Oh mon Dieu, I look just like my ex.
We both then turned to Ahani to see she was mostly unchanged, with the exception of her hair becoming shockingly blonde and the enormous braided mustache and beard that went all the way down to the floor. She crossed her arms disapprovingly and mumbled something about, "Great, my dad." With our disguises donned, we rushed from the house and out toward Mindas Castle.
Hi, my name is Matthew Lewis, and I do the voice of Kycell Bakshi, along with all the additional voices in The Forgotten Minotaur King. I hope you enjoy the podcast and continue to listen into the future. If you want to support my content, please donate to my Patreon, Matthew Lewis Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Matthew Lewis Podcasts, all one word. Follow me on Twitter at Matthew Lewis P. Or leave a positive maximum star review on your podcast app of choice. If you found this podcast, I assume you're familiar enough with the genre to know how important reviews are to the survival of a channel. And I hope you recommend this to your friends. Or if you didn't like it, you could recommend it to your enemies, and I'll teach them a lesson. Keep it sleazy, folks, and thank you.